All right. So I hope your day is off to an awesome start this morning. I hope that you're ready to take on all kinds of exciting things. We also have the author of a book who is joining us this morning. Her name is Nikki, and she has just written an incredible memoir called Fraud, which is a powerful story of unmasking the self. It's a tale of a young mother who's forced to examine a life of lies and deceit from behind bars. That's right, an unexpected encounter in a grimy prison who gives her the wings to fly free. So it's a true story. She was sent to Nopoort, a rehab center in the remote Northern Cape, run by a pastor who brandished a tattoo of Satan. And in this hellhole, she met Jake, a handsome son of a wealthy Afrikaans family. And this is all from somebody who had a terrible heroin addiction and has rebuilt her life from the start after that. And I thought this would be an interesting story to get into. You know, very often we have famous people that come in, they tell us, oh, you know, my life's been really hard. I drank too much at one point, or, you know, I had this problem or whatever, but I got over it. Very seldom do we speak to someone whose life actually unraveled to the point where they ended up in prison. Right, Lebang?
Yeah, no, literally. But it's also true that it's as soon as you start fixing things, those things from the past find themselves creeping in and just revealing themselves. So it's always interesting to see like how people deal with that. So that's what I'm interested to chat about today.
Well, her name is Nikki Munitz. She's with us now. Hey, Nikki, how are you?
Good morning. I'm good, thanks. How are you guys?
Good.
Good.
But how the hell does someone like you, who comes from a private Jewish school in Joburg, who you know, has a family who care about her, how the hell do you end up in, first of all, Noport, which is this notorious rehab center? We always hear about it in the news. It seems to occasionally get a couple of people off of the drugs, but it seems also to be full of real psychopaths who just want to inflict all kinds of harm on people. Certainly, that's the impression we get from the stories that sometimes come out about this place. There are also lots of people who say, oh, no, it's been terrific for me. But then you also end up in prison.
Hmm.
Wow.
I didn't just end up in prison. I was 8 years clean when I landed up in prison. So
Jesus.
yeah,
All
the
right.
story a bit of a back to front, a consequence that came to bite me many years later.
And all of this came about because you support Liverpool. Unbelievable.
Right, this is the shrine. If it was because I supported Liverpool, it would have been worth it.
All right, let's be serious for a second. So tell us the story. I mean, I don't mean for you to give up the whole reason that people should read the book, but
Yeah.
how does this happen? Where did your life start to unravel?
I think my life started to unravel from, the very beginning. It was a complete setup, every piece fitting perfectly in order to create that perfect storm.
Yeah.
I did this inner child workshop the other day, and I found this picture of myself at school, and I was amongst the top achievers, and I had colors all the way down my blazer, and I had the biggest smile on my face, and would have been voted least likely to stuff their lives up.
Hmm.
But internally, that isn't how I felt or what I was experiencing at all. It was all
So
just the facade.
what was going on internally? Were you suffering from severe depression? Did you have more severe mental illnesses than that? Was there a lot of anxiety? Were you on medication? Like, how does it all begin? Because you sound like you know, the kind of daughter that most parents would dream of having.
Mm.
I think I was the kind of daughter that most parents dream of having. I think my family wasn't the family that most kids dream of having. And I really just spent my time, kind of pretending that everything was okay when it really, really wasn't. And I thought that what I was experiencing was really different to what everyone else was. I now know, especially since publishing the book, that that's not the case. A lot of people grow up in really dysfunctional homes, probably the majority of people.
But
Um,
how dysfunctional?
Well, I mean, I was the last child of four, the baby of four. I've got three older brothers. My father died just before I turned 10. So my mom had four children, all under the age of 18. And she was quite mentally unstable. She is still
Okay.
alive. So if she's listening to this, I will tell her that to her face. And I think to some degree she knows that. But I think she doesn't understand or acknowledge how that severely impacted me. Yeah.
All right. So, I mean, drugs we know are a bigger problem now than they probably were when you and Lebang and I were at school and at varsity and post that time, because I think a lot of people, it's just become very ordinary for people to be
Yeah.
doing drugs. And I suppose that most people think, well, what's the harm? I just smoke a bit of weed every now and then, or maybe they do something a little bit more hectic than that. But heroin is always the one that you hear, you think, no, 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 no. That's the thing that I definitely
Mm.
know. None of my friends do any heroin.
Yeah. That was always like the worst of them all. Like it's like entry level is weed, and then it
Mm,
gets a little bit more hectic. But like heroin was always like quite scary. How
yeah.
was how did that was that like as a result of how you grew up and how you felt as a child?
Yeah, for me, I felt exactly the same. Cocaine was okay, heroin was terrifying. And when I met the person that introduced me to it, he said to me, "Don't believe what you see in the movies. It's all dramatized and it's really not that bad. And, you'll be able to have a big night out and you can use heroin and you can go to sleep and you can be okay the next day." And I believed him. And so I tried it. And it wasn't that bad the first time.
Hmm.
So how does, because heroin is different, that you have to inject it, right? For starters?
No, no. Initially, I
No.
started. No, that's why I thought, like what I saw in the movies was not true. Because yes, you can inject it, obviously, but that wasn't how I initially started. I started snorting it and smoking it. And what I didn't know is that it became so quickly physically addictive. So within
Mm.
3 days, I was already in trouble.
Wow. 3
3
days.
days.
Yeah.
And what does it do to you that made you so addicted? Like, what does it feel like to do heroin?
It feels like the ultimate euphoria. There was an experiment done with baby guinea pigs that, every time you took them away from their mothers, they would scream. Then
Mm.
they gave them heroin and they wanted nothing to do with their mothers anymore.
Damn.
And for me, that was the most perfect explanation of what heroin gave to me. It was like I thought I had found the Holy Grail. That was really the experience for me.
So it's just this absolutely, you use the term euphoria. It's just this
Mhm.
perfectly happy, satisfied, warm, fuzzy, life is
Correct.
great feeling that is the opposite, I suppose, for a lot of people of their reality.
Absolutely. Just feeling like I needed for nothing anymore, that I'd had that warm hug that I'd been craving so badly. I now had it, it was there for me. Yeah.
And so it was also filling a hole in your life. I mean, it
Mm.
wasn't just like a recreational drug that was making you feel extremely happy for that time that you were on it, but it was also closing up wounds that you had from family and from growing up and things that you were definitely missing.
I'm always reluctant to, say that, to blame something or why I use drugs. And of course, I run a rehab and we teach our clients to take responsibility. But the reality is, this is a survival mechanism.
Hmm.
And no one becomes addicted to drugs just because, it's random. It's not random at all.
Mm.
It's filling some need that I'm unable to meet in any sort of healthy way. And that's the
Mm.
perfect storm.
Nikki, how old were you when you first, started using heroin? And also, what was the point where it was like, okay, I need help now? Or was it a case of you didn't identify you need help, but maybe somebody in the family was like, our child needs help? Like, what was that turning point? And when exactly did you start? Like, how old were you?
I was 17 when I started, and within 2 weeks, I already knew that I needed help. It's so
Mm.
funny because all my drug addict friends were like, "Oh, you need help." When your
Jeez.
drug addict friends are saying to you, like, "There's a problem here," you know that it's pretty serious. But it took me quite a while to actually get the help that I really needed. There was some interventions of going to stay with my brother for a bit and him pumping me full of marijuana in order to try and deal with any sort of withdrawal.
Wow.
And there was a trip to try and get me away till I eventually went to rehab the first time, which I didn't take seriously. I mean, I was 18 and still had a lot to learn. And I was in Nopert. I turned 21 in Nopert. So that process was relatively quick. Yeah.
21st birthday in a rehab center. That's not how
Sure.
most people want to see their 21st birthday in. So, all right, let's just talk about Nopert for a second, because I'm still trying to figure out whether this place gets a hard rap just because they do hard work with people who really need to be treated in a very harsh way sometimes, because they're not going to break out of their bad habits any other way, or whether this place is just, run by psychopaths. So it's hard to figure out what's true. Tell me what Nopert is. Tell me where it is, for starters, because it sounds very mysterious. And what kind of means and methods they use to get people off of drugs.
I can tell you what it was like then. I think it's changed somewhat now. I mean, I was there in 2001, giving away my age here. But, it was very different. There were no professionals at all. It really was run by psychopaths. And people also starts to get. And I don't think it's changed too much, but they have brought in some social workers and things like that. The methodology is there is that the only pill that you need is the gospel.
So filling the hole with another.
And when you complain about anything, the response is, if the crack house didn't kill you, then the off food certainly won't.
But I mean, you weren't even Christian, so them pushing Christian stuff down your throat, was that a tactic they just didn't care about, or?
Oh yeah, that's not optional.
Really?
Church for 5 hours on a Sunday, 2 hours every Tuesday and Thursday. Like everything is Bible based, but not for me, not the true definition of, but rather just their version that they can use it in order to try and control you and manipulate the situation.
It's very strange. Okay, so I mean, did they help you at all? Is the point? Because if you got out of there and you were clean in inverted commas, then maybe that did give you a chance to start again, or did it not help you?
Well, I think I was really grateful to have a bed to sit in and 3 meals a day. But it didn't. I thought that my solution was finding my ex-husband and getting married and having my own family. That was how I managed to have this pseudo recovery for just under 8 years before I relapsed again. So they never actually taught me any skill tools that were going to be beneficial. If anything, my life took a severe nosedive, and my consequence was about 50 million times worse than anything that I had ever experienced in the past.
So just explain the story of this guy that you met in rehab, because this husband that you ended up marrying, this guy you met in rehab, which is always a good place to meet someone. If you're not on Tinder, guys and girls, if you're not on Tinder or on Bumble or on Hinge, you could always go to rehab to find the love of your life.
From one drug to the other.
You know what they say, when you find someone in rehab or in a 12-step meeting to get into a relationship, that the odds are good that you're going to find someone, but the goods are odd. That you should be really mindful of what you bring home with you. So he was gorgeous, and that was obviously my first attraction. And he was really funny, and he told me everything that I wanted to hear. I had grown up, as I said, my mom had 4 children under the age of 18. She was a single parent. Finances were tough, and his parents had dropped him off in a Rolls Royce, which I actually didn't know at the time. But the discussions that we landed up having was, I want to make you my wife and fight with you over the credit card bill. And I was like, right, where do I sign? I'm in.
You got scammed.
Wow. You see, because drug addiction doesn't just hit poor people or very rich people. It hits everybody. And this is, I suppose, the hardest thing is that You know, a lot of very wealthy people go, oh, no, well, it could never happen to us because our child was raised with resources and means, and there's no way he'd end up
Mm.
on the street doing whatever he needed to do for his cocaine or his heroin or anything else, right? That's bullshit.
Well, I mean, you only need to look at a huge chunk of celebrities to know that that's bullshit. Yeah.
Right. So you kind of fall in love with this guy, and you realize that it's not all, you know, a bed of roses. First of all, holding anything together, including your own sanity when you're an addict, is tough. We know that, and I'm pleased to hear that you're running your own rehab. We'll talk about that in a second. But then to be sharing a relationship with someone who's also an addict, both of you are fragile. You've met under the circumstances of being addicts.
Mm.
You're now going to start a family together. I I predict a lot of crying.
A lot of toxicity, perhaps even.
You guys make it sound so simple that you could just see. I couldn't see a thing. I really was completely blind. I thought this was love. He came from a family where his parents were still married. His sisters both have doctorates. And I was like, this is an amazing family that I'm getting involved with. And there was a draw for me. They were quite a hectic family in terms of things that they had been through. And it made them feel quite powerful. And I felt really grateful that they kind of included me as one of their own. What I
Yeah.
didn't know is that the reason they were taking me in was to have me as kind of a live-in babysitter for their son.
Right.
Oh, that's
Now
so messed up.
that's interesting because obviously they were sick of looking after him and he was a problem. Now it needed to be your problem as well, not just theirs.
Correct. And I took that job on, no problem, under this premise that, first of all, I didn't really know what it meant to be a wife. I was really young when my dad died. And as I said, I came from dysfunction. So, like, I thought that was kind of the role that I needed to play. I also, coming in the type of abuse that transpired in the relationship, real physical abuse, emotional, mental, I really believed for a long period of time that it was me. I also had grown up being told that I was the problem, even by my own biological family, So I thought I made him do those things to me, and I needed to be better. And so I spent just almost 10 years trying to be better.
Yeah, and because you know that you aren't a perfect person in any way, shape, or form, and you know that you're susceptible to a bunch of things, there's a tendency also to blame yourself for stuff that you aren't even responsible for, i.e., the stuff that your husband is doing or the stuff that other people are doing to you.
Yeah.
You go,
Yeah.
oh well, I was wrong on the drugs. I must be wrong on everything.
Sure. And at that point, if you've been doubting yourself most of your life, it's easy to slip right back into that space of anxiety. Like growing up, I was told I was wrong. I was the problem. Now I'm in rehab. I'm the problem. Now I'm in this marriage. Of course, I'm still this ongoing problem. Nikki, what was that turning point for you in the marriage where you're like, actually stop the clocks? Because they always say that a woman or whoever's being abused in a marriage, they'll try to leave the first time, they'll try to leave the second time, but they'll only actually leave like the seventh or eighth time. So what was it for you? Like that was the camel that broke the straw that saying? What was that moment where Thank you, Gareth. When were you
For
just
me,
like hurtful?
Yeah, for me, it did feel like the camel that broke the straw's back. Yeah, so I think that I was almost forced into the situation, after the crime happened and the arrest, which, I'll talk more about. My legal team actually said to me, now's the time, you need to go. And I think it was more being driven by my children and wanting to protect them than to protect myself. I think if I didn't have kids, I probably would have stayed and died there. Yeah, so seeing my son crawling around with a syringe in his hand that he had found, a used syringe, that was a big kind of factor for me. But I only half left. We were living in Pretoria at the time, and I moved into another house in Pretoria. But it took my legal team saying to me, listen, this family is going to burn you. Like, you need to pack up your kids and go. That was the catalyst for me. Yeah.
And at this stage, were you getting like any support from your family? Like, how was your relationship with your mom at this stage and your brothers? Was anybody, there for you while you were going through all of this on your own?
So I had partly moved away. He had, kind of estranged me from my family. So I had started having contact with him because I had no choice. Being arrested will do that to you. You got to make a phone call, and who do I call? And yeah, so I was quite distant from them, but the process of reaching out to them had started, but it was still quite awkward. I was quite alone initially. Yeah, during that period.
And obviously
Sure.
during this time also financial constraints because the money's being spent on drugs. You got kids that need food, that need clothing, that need care. So there must have been a lot of pressure on the purse strings.
Absolutely. I mean, the interesting part for me is that I actually got clean like 3 months before I got arrested for the crime. So I was clean at the time when my son was crawling around with a syringe. It wasn't mine; it was my ex's. And so yeah, for me, it was that process of change had already started. Yeah.
Nikki, let's talk a bit about the crime. I mean, starting with this habit and the drugs side of your life and essentially moving away from that because now you've been able to identify how dangerous that is, not only for yourself, but most importantly for your kids. Now, how do you move from that into criminal?
Very easily, believe it or not. It's for me.
You're already a lawyer, so I mean that helps you.
I wasn't a lawyer, but I worked for a lawyer. I worked as a legal secretary,
Right.
and I had access to the trust account. Not a good combination. And very much like drugs, I had this idea that I'd just do it once and I'd put the money back and I wouldn't do it again. And once became 37 times before,
Jesus.
I actually
How much money were you meant to have stolen? 2.5 million?
Correct.
Oof.
Yeah.
So when you go to court for stealing 2.5 million, that's a fraud case. You end up going to jail for how long? What's the sentence there?
So initially I got sentenced to 8 years, which is why this kind of it went on for so long and why I was 8 years clean when I went in. The crime happened in 2007. I was under investigation and only arrested in 2009. Originally sentenced in 2011 and only went in serving my sentence in 2015.
Good Lord. Okay, so while you're doing all of this, you're fighting this in court, you're trying not to go to jail, and you end up going to jail. Life carries on, and you've got kids. Those that you can't just put the kids on pause. Say, all right, mommy's got some shit to deal with. So what happens to them during this time?
I changed my life and I tried to live as best as I could that this wasn't happening. And I really believed in my mind that if I did all the right stuff, that, there would be some other resolution that would take place. And I landed up getting this incredible job at, one of the most prestigious rehabs in South Africa and really working myself up from an admin job to like a junior counselor all the way up to the most senior. And really, I believe, giving all of myself and growing in a career that I believe is my purpose. And thinking there's no ways after I've changed my life the way that I have that I'll go to jail. Turns out God had other plans and I still did go to jail. But at that time, I mean, I went to prison with the most incredible support. My husband that I'm married to today, he supported me and my children when I went into prison. My employer paid my salary while I was in prison. Like I had the most incredible support network. And so for me, I understand now that all of that preparation got me ready to be able to go and do something that was going to be really difficult. Yeah.
Had you had that happen at any other time? Sure, Lord knows. It probably wouldn't have been, it wouldn't have been the same result.
Yeah.
Nikki, listening to you, I'm just thinking about, the term everything happens for a reason, right? Do you believe that you experienced all of that as some sort of like, testimony, or like for you to be able to write your book, or for you to even just be able to sit here and speak to myself and Gareth today, just so that other people can hear your story. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot for one person, but it almost sounds as though you've come to terms with the fact that you had to go through that and experience that.
Prison, besides my children and my marriage, is the best thing that ever happened to me. It gave me perspective on my life. And I landed up doing a course on self-esteem in prison that changed how I see myself, how I see the world, and the work that I do today. And I believe that it is the cornerstone of our existence, and why people land up so self-destructive in their behavior is this particular area of lack. And so the work that I do and the facility that I run is all based around self-esteem development and making those changes that people no longer need to live in a survival mode, because that's what I believe my life was, pretty much.
The book is called Fraud, but it's a play not only on your crime, but the fact that you were a fraud. You weren't being your real self. And I think a lot of people go through their lives and they never really encounter their real selves until it's too late. So when you talk about things like self-worth and figuring out self-esteem and things like that, which people, a lot of very, very capable, very brilliant people don't know how to access this part of themselves where they actually finally think that they're worthy. Many people in South Africa could benefit from this, and I know that this is part of your practice, but was there an aha moment, or was it just as a result of working hard day in, day out, repeating mantras to yourself, reading stuff, sitting around with people who actually know what they're talking about, and listening carefully to them and internalizing that stuff? How does it come about?
You're absolutely right. Most people think self-esteem is about confidence. But for me, the reality was that if I think about my job, I was really confident. I knew I was good at what I did, but I still felt like a worthless piece of shit simultaneously. And so the self-esteem work was about getting to that place where I no longer felt like I was, pretending to play a role. And what I was telling people versus how I felt was different, because that's pretty much how I lived. And it's about reparenting and reprogramming, because the information that gets given to us from the time we're born it's incorrect. And I believe as adults, we spend our lives redoing the programming that was given to us, from our parents, unintentionally a lot of the time. We need to kind of re-put that information into this computer processor so that we see ourselves in the world differently. Yeah.
I love that reparenting and reprogramming. It literally is every day. That's what we're like slowly doing, sometimes consciously, mostly subconsciously. Nikki, how's your relationship with your kids now? Like having had you for a little bit and then like you were gone, and then are you guys cool now? Do they ever, are you open about your experience in prison with them? Are they like completely involved? What's that like? And, being on the other side of it all.
My relationship with them is amazing. It's so funny. This morning on Facebook, I was reading, someone was asking a question. I had a drug addiction 18 years ago, and now my daughter's 16. Someone has asked me to come and talk to their kids. My daughter knows nothing about it, and we've got this incredible relationship I don't want her to know. I sat thinking, do you have an incredible relationship if they don't even know who you were or who you are? And for me, honesty has always been the cornerstone of my relationship with my children. I never wanted them to doubt their reality in the way that I doubted mine.
Sure.
That's
always been a part of.
Did it take you a while to start being honest with people about the stuff that you'd been through, or was it just impossible to hide? Because there's one side of that which is about being brave and courageous. The other side, which is like you can't get away from this. People will know if you've been. How long were you in jail for again?
9.5 months.
What's that like, that experience? Because I don't know much about women's prisons. I don't think they're very much better than men's prisons in South Africa. They may even be worse in some ways. What happens to you in there, and what's that experience like? Just give us the kind of the top line stuff about here's the average day in a women's prison in South Africa.
Is it like in the movies?
It is worse than the movies.
Oh.
You become a number. You come into prison, they take your normal clothes, you get given a uniform, you lose your name, you just get a number. That's your identification. And you're in a cell with like 38 other prisoners, sharing one bathroom, one toilet that doesn't even have a door. It's kind of got a sheet around it, and 2 showers that you get 5 minutes in the middle of the night, because that's the only time the water gets hot. So you locked up from 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You hang a chip packet next to your bed in order to catch cockroaches so that they don't climb onto you in the middle of the night. And you wake up at like 11 o'clock midnight so you can have a 5-minute shower and go back to sleep before they come wake you up at 7 a.m. for your parade, where you stand outside and they count you and check you. Yeah, it's not a pleasant experience. And I've had people, I was listening to your last thing about people getting away with crimes and things. I think, damn, why wasn't that me? But essentially, I'm pretty grateful that,
in other words, so to summarize, you would not recommend prison. You would not say this is like a 5-out of 10 on Yelp.
Not on the bucket list, no?
Not on the bucket list. And people think I wasn't punished enough in 9.5 months. But let me tell you, one night in prison was not worth the 2.5 million in terms of experience. I'm really glad that my story unfolded the way that it did, and that I got to learn about myself in the way that I did. But wow, it's not a nice place. Really not a nice place.
Sure. I mean, it's 2.5 million as well. That's quite a bit of money. I think the burning question that everybody wants to know is, Nikki, what does a person do with 2.5 million?
Well, unfortunately, I'd love to say I've got something to show for it. I really don't. Anything of value that I did purchase, I sold in order to pay back whatever I could. A huge chunk of the money was given out to my ex and his father, and the rest I used on drugs. There was nothing to show for it in the end.
Isn't it very, very difficult not to slip back into the drugs when you're in jail? Because there's nothing else really. And although you had your kids on the outside waiting for you, and you had this support structure in the form of your new husband, and you had an employer, so you had a job to get back to at the end of it all. 9 months is a long time. There must have been many moments of despair there where you thought, my life is over. Like, there's no one who's going to accept me back into society. Nobody's going to go, oh, hey, Nikki, and invite me around like they might have before. I'll have to start from scratch. Maybe it's better if I just end it, or why don't I just take all the drugs?
I must say I did sometimes have those thoughts, especially marijuana is super easily accessible. Other drugs they do use, but it's not quite as prevalent as you would think, more challenging to get in. But, as I said, I was 8 years clean at the time. And for me, I always tell people that my heroin addiction was a life sentence and my prison sentence had an ending. Very different in terms of my thinking around that. And I was also really blessed. It sounds bizarre, but I came into prison and there was a woman who was on her way out. She had got her parole date, and she asked me if I would be willing to take over her job, which was as a domestic worker for one of the captains. And so I got a job quite quickly. And so I wasn't with the main population during the day, only really from lockup. And I believe that was by divine intervention, because I would have gone mental sitting around all day. I actually don't know what I would have done, to be honest.
And how does the prison economy work? We're all fascinated by this. People have watched these series like Orange is the New Black, or you've seen movies like Shawshank Redemption. And, we hear stories about gangsters in prison and how it all works. But what is currency in prison? What can you get? What can you not get? How easy is it to communicate to the outside?
Very easy, considering we all had cell phones. The cell phones come from the prison wardens, that you deposit money into their bank accounts and they deliver it to you. And at the same time, then will come the next morning and search for it, as part of their jobs. and the rest of the
Like,
time the
it's
currency
like
is
Takealot. It's
cigarettes.
like Takealot, but with the threat of it being taken away anytime you like. You're
Well,
not
it's
sure.
like a game. You find the most incredible, like, creative ways to hide things. People make false bottoms in their coffee tins, in their hairdryer boxes, giving it to other people. You pay people with cigarettes in order to hide things for you. You can buy extra food with cigarettes. You can have your washing done with cigarettes. Yeah, cigarettes are main currency within the prison. Yeah, but you can get anything.
And Nikki, I mean, you can't sit there in your cell with your phone texting people, or can you?
Not
Well,
I hope I don't get into a lot of trouble for that. People do, they really do. And when the prison wardens come and they do their walk by, because remember, you're in your cell from 2 o'clock in the afternoon until 7 the next morning, and they come and check on you maybe twice or 3 times. So there's 7 cells. So the first cell will see the prison warden and make like a noise. So the rest of the cells are warned, time to hide your cell phones. And then there's like a scurry and people do that. Yeah, I mean, it's just
Because the minute you have a cell phone, or you can occasionally get something nice, even if you have to pay for it. Prison doesn't sound so bad. It sounds just like most Gen Z people's daily lives, except that they can move around a lot more.
well, yeah, I mean, that is probably the biggest difference, the moving around part. I mean, I'm making light of it, but
No, sure.
when I came out of prison, I hadn't told anyone when I was actually coming out, because I got bail and I landed up going back in again because I fought again at Supreme Court. And when I came out the first time, initially the thought was that I was going to miss Mother's Day. And my children's school ended up canceling the Mother's Day celebration so that my kids wouldn't feel out. I mean, like, this is kind of the level of support that we all had. So, sure, did we have privileges that we probably shouldn't have in prison? Absolutely. But did we also miss out on a lot? For sure. I couldn't say goodnight to my children, and I couldn't hug them. And, my first visits were behind glass. There was no human contact whatsoever. Yeah, it is still very much a punishment.
Nikki, how did you use your time in prison and your experience prior to that to fuel and influence the work that you're doing now? You mentioned briefly that you work at a rehab and you're obviously helping other people. How did you again use your experience and everything that you went through to influence what you're doing today?
Sure. So I think that in terms of the other prisoners there, for me, it was also a lead by example. So it was the way that I operated. And it's still something that I live by today. And, doing this course around self-esteem in prison, I came out of prison with a different knowledge of myself, and realizing that mainstream rehabs do not offer this type of intervention to clients. Not, I don't think it's out of bad intention, but simply because it's not information that they have. And so I went on this massive quest to find out more. And the woman who designed the prison course is now my mentor today. I mean, she wasn't the woman running the course at the time, but I managed to track her down, and I worked on my own self-esteem for about 2 years with her. And then together we designed a course specifically to be utilized in a rehab setting. And now it's the main focus of the work that I do. And I run these workshops all over the world, which, I mean, for someone like Gareth was saying, I sit there thinking, what kind of life am I going to have? Let me tell you, beyond my wildest imagination, that's the life that I actually do have. For someone who was sitting in prison thinking at times, who would actually want to be with me? Who wants to be my friend? I'm embarrassed my children. I've embarrassed myself. All of the shame I'm carrying around. Now people like invite me to present on an international stage. I'm like, how did that even happen?
That's phenomenal. And I think that's an important part of the story, because there are probably a lot of people who are listening to us now, maybe not so many, but there are maybe 1 or 2 who are listening to us now going, oh my God, my life is falling apart for whatever reasons, financial, health, relationships, whatever it might be. And they're listening to this going, well, clearly, that's still better than prison and a heroin addiction and being separated from your children and everything that you went through. And now you're on the other side, and life isn't just okay. You say it's beyond your wildest dreams, which gives the rest of us hope, that there's definitely a way out of everything. I mean, I think that's the most valuable thing that you could have said to answer Lebang's question. I love that. I think that's beautiful. Can I go back to prison quickly? I'm a little bit obsessed, but
Yeah, Gareth needs to know more about prison.
Ask away.
What is the environment like? What are the other women like? Is there a kind of a code? How does it work? Because it's a whole society that operates in there. Where are you allowed to go? Where are you not allowed to go? What exercise can you do? What do you eat?
Sure. So, there's 2 sections in the prison in terms of your sentence. So if you're 7 years and under, you're in one section, and then 7 years plus, you're in a different section. 7 years plus seem to have a bit more freedom, which makes sense because you're in there for a lot longer period of time. The section that I was in were kind of the repeat offenders, the petty criminals. They go in and out, in and out. That's their life. And so I think what I experienced was quite different in that regard. And so you can't go anywhere on your own. You need someone to open a gate for you every time you need to leave one particular section. You need an escort with you. I was really privileged that I didn't have to have that because I worked for one of the most senior captains. I could kind of come and go. Obviously, someone always had to open for me, but I had a lot more privilege in that regard. And I put that off to like the type of lifestyle that I was living that was completely clean and sober and already very honest, thankfully, at that point in time. It's just you have no say over your own life. If you have a headache, you can't go and get a headache tablet. If you are wanting to, I don't know, go to the shop to get something to drink, you can't do that. What the food is like, well, the morning is 2 slices of bread with some soya milk and some pap porridge. Lunch, which is about 11 o'clock, is like a protein of some sort. So it could be a piece of boerewors or 2 boiled eggs or a piece of chicken, some pap and some vegetables. And then there isn't really dinner because, as I said, you're locked up from 2 o'clock. So you get 1 loaf of bread to share between 5 people. And then the cell will get like a packet that's got either peanut butter or jam or something that you can have to eat in the evening. And once a month, you're allowed to go to Snoopy, which is the shop, and you get 400 Rand. Your family's allowed to put into that shop, and you can buy things like, I still get like called bully beef, right? And you can get your biscuits or whatever treats that you want, or some pasta, if you're hungry, like I said, cigarettes are the way to go. If I want more protein for lunch, I'm going to pay you 5 loose cigarettes and you're going to give me your piece of chicken. So that's kind of the way. And when I came out of prison, I looked at myself in the mirror. I was so pale. My hair was falling out. And I said to he wasn't my husband then, he was my boyfriend at the time. And I said to him, why didn't you tell me I looked so bad? He goes, you were in prison. Did I need to make life worse?
What do you miss? What do you miss the most when you're in there? What are you now so thrilled that you experience every day that you just take for granted before you go into prison, and after you've been in there, you're like, this is something I will never ever take for granted again?
Quiet and privacy.
Really quiet, huh? Because a lot of us seem to think that at night, for example, prison is quiet. It isn't.
It can never be quiet when you're in a cell with 40 people. There is never quiet, and there's never anywhere to go where you can just have time on your own. There's literally nowhere to hide. I think that was the most challenging for me. I enjoy my time to just catch my breath and to even think. You
got any tattoos? We spoke about that earlier.
I was waiting for that question. I was waiting for Gareth to ask.
I have many, but none from prison.
Okay, very very good. Very good. She's disproving my theory, right?
And it's so funny because people had this feeling towards me because I have all of these tattoos that I was quite scary, but that was all part of my mask, right? At one stage I had really short hair and they used to call me the short-haired angry tattooed girl. And I came into prison and people were like, oh, she's hardcore. Meantime, I'm just a squishy marshmallow, and have always been on the inside.
Wow. This is interesting. Max Sony says prison is more like a stream of constant cash for corrupt warders. The same guys that bring in contraband are the same guys who expose you. You're in their world, really. Shape up or ship out. Are you afraid of anything since you got out of prison? Because I would imagine that the one thing it does do for people is that you've seen the worst, right? You've seen how bad life can get. You've been at the very bottom. And in some ways, it kind of makes you a little bit fearless in your own life.
Well, am I afraid of anything? No, because I live with the knowledge that I can handle whatever comes across my path. I do believe that. I'm really diligent about doing everything by the book these days. I never, ever want to land up in a position, not only to go back to prison where people doubt me in that way. So I live a really authentic, open and transparent life.
Yeah, because they're going to be looking for any reason to not believe you. You're like,
Exactly.
oh, this is who stole money and she's a criminal.
The prison lady. Nikki, what's the worst thing you saw in there? Like, did you ever see anything that was like, this is the bottom? Or was it actually not as bad as it is in the movies?
Well, I mean, I think it's a bit of a funny story, but not so funny. I think it was one of the first visits that my husband came, and he was saying to me, oh, I made like a friend, because the way they come to visit, they get on a bus, they park their cars, they get on a bus, and they get transported to the prison before they come in for the visit. And he was like telling me, I made friends with this family, and I was like, oh yeah, their daughter's the murderer that had just been arrested recently. And he was like, what? What do you mean? And just the people that you would look at and think, no way, not in a million years, people that had done some really horrific things. And when you meet them, you're like, really? Did you really do that? I just can't believe it.
Sure.
So that was probably the most shocking. I saw fights and things. People, there were times where people had fights and pour boiling water on each other. We had kettles in the cell. We could make tea and things. And then our kettles would get taken away, which is really not nice, especially in winter. We all have hot water bottles. It's freezing in there. And then we don't have kettles.
Are there any makeshift weapons, with toothbrushes that are carved at the edge into a little spiky point? I mean, we've seen it all. Yes.
Yeah. Listen. Yeah, so I never saw anything like that. The most dangerous weapon probably was the kettle. But as I said, in the more heavy sentence part of the prison, it might have been different. Yeah.
And any friends that you made that you're still friends with from prison?
Friends is a really strong word. I really made some acquaintances while I was in there. It was necessary in order to function. But the person I'm still in contact with is the captain.
Oh, really? The one who you were the domestic worker for?
She's mentioned. Absolutely. In fact, I gave her daughter a job when I came out of prison, and we're still in touch. We speak relatively regularly. She's an incredible woman. Yeah.
And you didn't give her daughter the job as a return for favors that she'd given you in jail?
Yes and no. It was as to say thank you, because she really took care of me. But no, it wasn't a pre-arranged thing that, if you help me, I'll help you. It was really just to say, I'm grateful. I'm really grateful that you took care of me.
All right. So now you've got your own rehab, among other things. This is interesting. Lebang already asked you what from your experiences has helped you to do what you do now so much better and with so much more knowledge and understanding. But rehabilitation is very, very tough, and it varies from person to person, as I understand it. Is there any magic ingredient to rehab? Having gone through what you have, having seen it from, people trying to convert you religiously and replace one addiction with another, to people who helped you to build up your self-esteem with that course that you did, which obviously is a big win for anybody who's addicted to anything. Because the moment you value yourself more than the drugs, your life will get better. But are there other things that you think come into play here psychologically?
You know, absolutely. I think that there's two things from the the treatment side with the addict themselves. It's compassion and understanding. A lot of rehabs are only about either letting people get away with things because they've got too much of a sympathy for the client, or they're too harsh and direct. There needs to be a balance. And in terms of the family, it's about understanding that as you are the loved ones, you play a role in the dysfunction. So it's about also getting out of the way and letting the treatment unfold. Because often families interfere with the treatment process and it backfires every time. Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, thank you for sharing your story with us. I think if anybody's interested in this, and there'll be lots of people who will be interested in this, they should check out your book. This is what it looks like. It's called Fraud: How Prison Set Me Free, a memoir by Nikki Munitz. It's such a pleasure to spend time with you, Nikki, and thank you.
Thanks for having me. This was really fun. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I mean,
Thanks,
it's
Nikki.
more fun than jail, right? All right. Thank you, Nikki.
Gareth.
Nice to see you.